Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk more about my project and the high-level system design and the roadmap for this project. I think I'm getting closer and closer to the end of these life cycles that I'll probably start now, actually. So one of the updates that I have as part of my portfolio is offloading a lot of the experiences and node consolidations that I've had. I think I want to start with first is the data sources and references that I will be continuing to read and will be paying their services and insights to get their own expertise. That mainly being ByteByteGo, Alex Yu, and some of the resources as part of their homepage. I was curious to know more about the resume stuff based on what I currently know, and after about a year of interviewing and consistently making it to final rounds now, so I'm doing something right. But just because I'm doing something right doesn't mean things couldn't be better. So ByteByteGo has interesting insights that, I know, having been in, fortunately I have a job. Not everybody does. And I remember not being able to afford this myself. But I have been fortunate enough to have the privilege to be able to have a little bit of disposable income to invest in these things. And so I think, what I know from firsthand experience, not paying anything thus far, and being able to make it consistently to final rounds, but I'm not being chosen. Maybe there's something I'm missing and things that I could be better. And then in doing so, that I'm able to distill this information, make it my own, put my own take on it, and maybe help people out there. I don't think I want to do what everyone else is doing and making courses and services and platforms behind a paywall. I think that takes the joy out of making these videos out for me. And I think for me, like, that's why I get a job, So yeah, we're going to be recommending ByteByteGo, mainly because of the legacy and great resources from Alex on system design. It's all consolidated here. More recently, onboarding Steven for the behavioral stuff. So this was actually great insight. I think the biggest thing that I've gotten from analyzing the job interview process myself was, let me go back to my portfolio for a second. Was the communication aspect, as you go into the recruitment pipeline, who you're talking to, and the scope of breadth and depth. Then the next stage is the technical prep, whether that's a take-home, data structure and algorithm, something async or synchronous pair programming, a system design for your technicals, and you can go back and forth between these two until you get to the behavioral. Okay, so every company is a little bit different depending on the scale and where you're going, and the team, right? So there's some considerations there, but those should be outlined here. And an additional resource that I found helpful was, of course, maybe I'll start with NeetCode. NeetCode is a good example of me paying for Pro. Okay, so I have paid for this because I did find that it was helpful getting me started in a little bit of structured learning before I started learning about the other, let's say, industry trusted platforms and gold standards, let's say. So this has been helpful. Really great for DSA and helped me get started trying to understand everything, being non-traditional, not having a CS background. So this got me started. Then I got into more about ByteByteGo, and then more recently, a mentor had shared insight to Telo interview. This did help me get to like the intermediate level, and then other, let's say, commonly known resources like Design Primer, roadmap, system design, and coupling this together with the software architect was great. There are components in the architect roadmap that are not in the general system design, but independent of the resources covered thus far, there are other great videos and sources online that, as you can see, I've been let's say leveraging Gemini's text to at least aggregate some of these concepts from these other creators, and cross-referencing with existing, we'll say, references, right, to better understand, the components, the concepts, we'll say the core concepts. And let's go back to my portfolio, and aggregating them based on my full stack experience, based on a little bit of, let's say, vibe coded, like agentic web scraping. I try to structure it in my own way that made sense for me, so I'm not just like completely plagiarizing things and pirating things unintentionally. As you can see, we're using some of those frameworks and high-level designs and the time blocking concepts applied across the resources mentioned. However, where I'm going with this video is wanting to further enrich the design books. So I have them. I should up here. Right. So then there are, let's say, textbook industry standards, like this book, for example, or for machine learning, it's this book from Tripwin, right? So I will also be going through, not in this particular learning pattern I've been trying, but I think I'll be doing a more targeted DFS approach. I finished this one in Chip's book because of AI engineering boom and wanting to upskill in data science myself. And I think now it's a good time for me to revisit and take a deeper dive into these, this book specifically, and then maybe I'll revisit some of the other less known, or let's say talked about books that I thought and could be helpful, and continuing to aggregate and build on lessons learned. Of course, I'll reference the books themselves, the authors, as part of my portfolio. I think I'm in this section here, talking about the interviewing process specifically for this video will be the system design, and applying that, or rather applying these concepts, these first principles questions in the framework and structure that makes sense for me, and keeping, let's say, my own touch on this thing that I made up called the SWE compass. It just makes sense to me, because as I've been navigating some of these ambiguous questions, whether they're data science, some of them are data engineering, some of them lean more towards big data, some software, a little bit of cloud, DevOps stuff. It helps me navigate the abstraction questions like, you could deploy to cloud. Are you using a native cloud provider, let's say AWS, GCP, and then maybe you consider it Azure, depending on how coupled you are with their services. Why would you use AWS versus GCP? But for example, as I'll now go over with the high-level design, based on other constraints and non-functional characteristics of, let's say, the system in my portfolio, I actually have to rely more on third-party cloud providers like Vercel in order to meet the constraint and non-functional characteristics of this portfolio. Okay, so this is a little bit of insight in ramping up into some of the background tabs and resources that I've done, aggregating them based on my experiences, and continuing to build on, let's say, we'll keep the scope to the system design, my own work and what works for me, referencing the resources that helped me get to the point that I'm at now. And then at the very bottom, continuing to reference them and continuing to enrich what I currently have, not having to pay. And then I personally will be paying and distilling that information and my lessons learned. So it's not plagiarizing. In my own words that I will be studying and cleaning up my own notes here, because I'm hoping that not just for myself, but let's say peers that I know, that I can just have a consolidated one-stop shop resource. Maybe I have some junior engineers interested. And so rather than, continuing to consume bits and pieces of, content that may or may not be relevant to today. This is a project that I can showcase during interviews myself and to keep up with some of the books and technologies and continuing to, oh, that's a game I'm playing. Portfolio. To continue adding on to my own knowledge and skills, and I don't know, maybe one day I'll write my own book, right? So that's kind of the aim with this. I know LLMs make everything a little bit too easy to write things in text, and the quality could be a little questionable. But the skill of interviewing, I think, is going to be one that there is no net zero. At the end of the day, it's a skill after all, and there are other reasons to go through the process. It's not just system design at the end of the day. We then have to consider other characteristics with the team compatibility. That's not really in your control anyway. So the best that we can do is just prepare ourselves for the best way that we can. Okay, so that's that. Let's go into the high-level design of this project now. All right. So it's already been 10 minutes. I have a short version of this, and I usually do a longer version. I'll do the short version. I've been talking a lot already. Okay, so for this project, let me get my microphone out of the way. This is this entire portfolio is aimed to be a zero-cost architecture. Okay. So why I'm making all this is because the idea is that we need to have a portfolio. Okay. This is important because the marketable skills part generally means we are trying to demonstrate our ability to apply to enterprise scale. Okay. Or, whatever company you're trying to do. So I do make exceptions for the zero-cost architecture. I try to get as far as I can, right? Because some of the marketable skills now means, using Agentic CLI tools. People are asking about Codex, Cloud Code. I was using OpenCode as the free alternative, right? But you have to start questioning, like, which one do you use and why? Now you can use both Codex and Cloud Code, and then you start having those intellectual conversations in interviews saying, yeah, well, Anthropic had some terms of service issues with OpenCode, and you're not able to do that and model swap through their API for whatever reason, okay? So you are aware of these things, and you're aware of the trade-offs, and you keep up with technologies. This is also part of the system design. I don't think I have it part of the mental models, but I think I should after this video. In terms of supporting the portfolio and project mindset. So this is one of them. The other ones are, applying to enterprise scale in terms of marketable skills. It's taking open source, integrating with existing, we'll say, internal infrastructure. Okay, so we see that here with the skeletal that I've done and integrated part of my Vercel. I think it's worthwhile going through that in the high-level design rather than verbally stating about it. I think those are the main ones off the top of my head. Other than those programming languages, I'm really more interested in like what you've done, I guess, from a software engineering perspective. And let's say that for me personally, I think anytime you're doing a marketable skill, it's what business problem are you solving, have solved, and the impact. Result or lessons learned. I like that actually from my communication notes. So this is a big one actually, is business-driven development. Unfortunately, it's hard to do, let's say, machine learning science work, let's say science work in general for research and development, if you're not applying for those roles. And even then, you'll get questions about engineering scalability and being able to generate revenue in that regard, some way or another. Okay, so these are the main ones. This is important because demonstrating your applied technology stack, which I promise we will go over. I know it's been a long 15 minutes already. Will be important because there is an interest in this exact AI pipeline that I did for previous videos on that actually helped me in my recent interview. Currently in the final round, waiting to hear back if I get an offer or not. So, once again, consistently getting to final rounds and offers and getting ghosted and rejected like everybody else. So all that we can do is continuing to maintain our interviewing skills. And I think, again, it will be helpful not only for myself, but maybe for others too, just to have another aggregated resource, Okay, so now let's finally do the high-level design. So yeah, the main constraint is zero-cost architecture. So there is a inherent scaling issue here with the vertical scaling. I did verbally state all these things, and that's some of the things that I'm doing for the Vercel. That's wrapped on AWS for my front landing page. Even though it's in TypeScript and I have a Python backend that's connected to Hugging Face for me to be able to do some quantized model CPU and inference on 0 GPU, is at some point, if I want to do distributive computing and benchmarking, I had to start paying for things, right? So that'll fail that vertical ceiling there. Okay, so let's see. So I have a database, but it's mainly still in Python, and I'm trying to do some like GPU optimization and lower level things. I figured if I'm mainly doing Python, it'd be good to at least know, I'm going to consider SQL like a horizontal language to this for your database stuff, and then this will be like a lower level language. And then, of course, like more downstream, still a higher level language, TypeScript, for this web app stuff. We'll just call that JavaScript. So because it's basically JavaScript, then HTML and CSS, and then sure, I can get very specific with the frameworks and libraries, but these are the programming languages. Yeah. So that's what this is. And then I have agents built on top of this. So, all right. Let me be specific and say Google Gemini. I think it's important to at least, be explicit about it. The model selection and the brand first, I think, because very similar to system design. This is a text-to-text model, right? This is Google's text-to-text model. So I've already mentioned, let's say if we're using Codex, that's OpenAI's CLI tool. This is Cloud Code, that's Anthropic's. And then, this is an open code. It's an open source version of all these CLI tools. Okay, so it's important because we want to get to this level. We want to get to the abstraction where we're at the design phase, not necessarily the lower level implementation of the specific brand and model, because I did get asked this, which I'll do now. Hold on before I go too far. Let me finish this. So, all right, so this is powering my resume agent, and then this is my job board. Okay. I should put a dotted line. Maybe not, actually. Let me not do that. Let me do portfolio. Okay. So the reason why I have R/C is because I got corrected in an interview that I had one time where the Ask My AI resume RAG agent that I have on my portfolio, when you talk about it, I, at the time, when I originally did this in the January of this year, called it a Vectorless RAG approach, but I got corrected because the person who's been doing this for 16 years had said this is more of a Cache-Augmented Generation approach. I didn't get that job. Made it to the final round in that job. So I'm taking all this knowledge and expertise and insight from these jobs and aggregating them and consolidating them here, and then open sourcing my own notes, and then hopefully it helps people. All right, so that's what this is. And then for now, I'm going to now talk about the Hugging Face layer to this. Okay, so it's all connected. So the Hugging Face layer, one of the things that I'm doing is I'm trying to fit a quantized small. All right, so there's a reason why I'm trying to do a quantized small language model. However, like I'd been hinting at, I've actually been also looking into zero GPU. I should put Google Colab here too. Why not? This is my high level design. Google Colab. All right. So, in Google Colab, while I'm here, there are, of course, this is a CPU, right? But this is a GPU. But Google Colab also natively has a TPU that you can use. Okay. It's an older model. It's a V5. We're at V7 or 8 nowadays. This one, NVIDIA T5, I think. Okay. I don't have to memorize this because I have my own notes written here, right? So T4, V5. Okay. So I did get asked this in an interview if what I'm doing is completed or in progress. So it's actually very important as part of the effective communication and behavioral is the signal completion. Of course, you read more about signaling at the right level and what was your impact and your scope of work. Okay. That's out of scope for this video. So for this topic, the Google Colab is because there's free resources to learn more about CPU computing. You can program in C and C++ on Google Colab. I know the notebooks natively already start out with Python. So that was great for me because now I can start learning about CUDA. Because the NVIDIA Blackwell, right, even though it's a more state-of-the-art enterprise, I'm using 1x, but you can do extra large too. Let me correct it. Okay, so there are two sizes that you can do on zero GPU that are free to gain access to NVIDIA Blackwell, but you get like 5 minutes of inference a day, and you don't get metal access to the NVIDIA Blackwell on zero GPU and Hugging Face. You can get lower level hardware access, but not completely on Google Colab's NVIDIA T4. So that's something I'm playing around with and trying to learn more about C, C++, and CUDA development. But similar to the conversation about branding, CUDA is NVIDIA's GPU. Okay, so this solves getting access to NVIDIA hardware. All right. So that's how everything's connected. Unfortunately, there is no API. I can try to glue together something between the Google Colab and stuff, but until then, that's a manual thing. The quantized small language model is on the CPU. Okay, so that's why it's at this above abstraction layer here. What was more interesting to the interviewers in my most recent one was this AI model, local pipeline that I have for my video. Because in this one, we have OBS for video capture. Okay, open source. And then we have OpenAI, open source Whisper model. Okay. So what I was trying to communicate in the interviewer for why I have this high level design is the problem statement that I was having is the YouTube data pipeline. Okay, so the YouTube data pipeline is you record a video, you upload the video, video is processing or processed, Gemini encodes, that takes, well, hold on, let me not do the time stuff for now. And then you can use Ask AI, okay, to get transcript. Subtitles. Text. Okay. Let's say timestamps. Well, let me put that in green because that's what I want. Okay, so recording a video takes me an hour. I upload the video, that takes like maybe 10 minutes. But the processing part takes like another 10 minutes. The Gemini encoding part is after it gets processed. So this might take like another 2 hours before you can ask AI to generate timestamps. So I will not be doing that. Instead, record video plus real-time transcription. Why not just use a voice-to-text model to get the encoding of my video and audio to text so that video is processed plus transcripts. Right, and the value add here, timestamps, is I get a title, body, hashtags, takeaways already up front. This is all text anyway. This is not AI generated. That's the intent and why I'm making these videos. I think there's going to be an interesting shift in having more human videos. Whether I get viewers or not doesn't really matter to me. Yeah. So the impact here is it saves me 3 hours so that I can just have fun ranting and not have to worry about editing things. I get to go on 30-minute rants that keeps my interviewing skills warm. And then surprise, I'll just go back to my own videos, ask AI, summarize my own notes, and then continue enriching it with knowledge concentrated within this own spectrum, right? So I'm also offloading a lot of this work that I'm doing, enriching it later. Then I'll come back and like make a more polished version of this. Okay, so that's the high level design. If you do the token stuff, I was also discussing in an interview that I want to be able to pass this through the small language model. Things are marketable. I should be able to have a pipeline. It's already deployed. So there's no reason why I can't just on push also get whatever transcript I need to. Technically, I don't need to feed it back into Gemini. However, looking at, let me do a square. I don't like that. Looking at the output transcript, I'll pull it up in a moment because this is part of the effective communication and actually showing these things rather than just talking about it. And I will be going through my OBS settings for this. Is I want to offload some of the Gemini API costs and the token usage by using the small language model that I have internally hosted on my own infrastructure within the zero cost architecture. Okay. Just to, keep things marketable, and like these are things you do at enterprise scale anyway, so might as well just get that mentality and demonstrate these things and to be able to effectively communicate these things. Whether or not I get a job or not, I mean, listen, I'm keeping up with marketable skills and applying these and having demonstratable projects, so I'm fine. Let's see. So yeah, so YouTube also has an API that you can use to prepare the payload and then upload it. This is then setting me up for recursive posting, similar to what I do with LinkedIn, rather than ad hoc posting. Okay. So that at that point would fail the zero cost architecture because then I have to start thinking about blob storage for the videos. At this point, the text and timestamps encoding in videos have already been processed and I can save the metadata. I have a little bit of bandwidth for the Postgres database, but at that point, if it's such a lightweight, like I'm maybe going to start with 12 videos, like once a month and post that month over month, year over year, I can just like put 12 key value pairs in like a JSON thing and then figure that out. And as long as the data is structured in some way, it doesn't have to be stored like in a cloud database. It could just be a lightweight file that just has data there that I can deterministically automate through the pipeline, or I guess I make an agent and like I optimize SEO hashtags. Like, yeah, I could also do all that, but like that's a lot of overhead for a recreational project that I'm doing for fun. Okay, so this is the high level design. Let me pull up the transcript, see if it opens. Okay, so this is what I was talking about regarding the transcripts. This is recording the time, and it's structured in a way that is capturing my voice as it transcribes what I'm saying. So I've actually had very good success with this. All right, let me now pull up the settings here in my OBS. Because part of the interview process that I've had was discussing this exact project in pipeline. So I know I made quick videos about this, but here's the interviewing experience that I've had and am planning to have further discussions on, because this was the technology that they were interested in. It was transferable with taking a local model and integrating it with not just existing hardware and workflows, but this is not embedded AI. It's just integrating a model. In this case, it's OpenAI's Whisper model. And small wins like this to save time or generate revenue. So for me, it saves time. And then we had a greater discussion about model selection. I've had an hour video already about this, but this is new. So I've made shorter videos about this, but this is the in-depth rationale, just in case someone watches this, and it helps me reinforce this conversation anyway. So in that interview, we had the conversation about like, you know, I'm using the tiny model. I'm specifically using the English model because I'm already speaking the English. I don't need access to other languages to transcribe or translate to English. So I'm doing English to English. I'm not doing, let's say, Mandarin to English, for example. And maybe the English model is fine-tuned itself to do that, right? And so the comparisons between, well, why not use these other quantized models? Well, I wanted the maximum performance. If I wanted the maximum performance, then why not use the largest, you know, why not the small English model? Why not the medium English models and their respective quantized models? Okay, because then at that point, I'm trading off latency when honestly, I'm not asking for much quality of the output. This is like good enough, and it doesn't put too much strain on resources and compute for my own hardware, right? So those are the other constraints and considerations to have, because I am locally translating this on my own hardware. This is not cloud. Even if it was cloud, I don't know where that's being sent. So there's some security aspects to that as well. And the key word is local, not edge, because with local, I don't need Wi-Fi or connection, internet connection at all. And I'm bringing this up because in that interview, there was questions about my settings when I verbally stated like, hey, I was looking into partial transcriptions and trying to deal with the artificial latency that I have, because I wasn't happy with the latency. So if I was doing a cloud provider, besides the security aspect, there is another layer of potential latency. And so I wanted something closer to Metal as much as I could. So I went from edge to local and went to Metal and local for that reason. Okay. So with all those other considerations out of the way, that's what this specific project pipeline at a high level and how my portfolio is all interconnected and some of the roadmap. So this is already a long video. I wanted to keep the scope to just system design. What I'm currently working on with the interview process, I have been working on what effective communication looks like across stakeholders. For this video, I'll pull up the system design part and I'll save this because I don't want to do this again. And then applying that to this portfolio, which is honestly pretty, not like over-engineered, but this is a lot. But it's mine, so it's fine. And wanting to show people, even with zero cost, I've been having good success, even though I don't have a new job, with being able to demonstrate these things, communicate them, not having to pay for anything, and being able to consistently make it to final rounds at big tech and small companies as well. So I would like to think I'm doing something right. Like everyone else, I just have to keep going. But unlike everybody else, I know not everybody can afford some of the resources behind Go, for example, or Hello Interview. So I will be going through those paywalls, like I have with Decode, that help me get started, and developing my own version and take on this as a free resource, enriching what I currently have with my experiences actively interviewing and doing this professionally, and continue to upskill and grow myself in areas like C and C++ and CUDA development. Let's see. Let me go to the lifecycle. And closing out the lifecycle for my own projects, right? So even for myself, as I've grown throughout my career, I started out as a little bit of a data science, machine learning engineer, but tried software engineering development and then got exposure to the data engineering lifecycle a little bit. Quickly realized, like, as I've been doing my own work outside of work, the open source stuff here, there's a lot more in the DevOps side that I needed to learn more about and how that applies and differs from the ML ops side of things, for more enterprise stuff. And so I just wanted to be more aware of these things, and then across these domains, the main takeaway and value add that I think I could provide with what I'm doing and why I'm doing all this work is really to try to find like an agnostic framework across these domains, to be able to ask these questions, to be able to pass any and all system design interviews, at least for the good interviewers that want to see your thinking. And then if people want more, we'll say professional support and additional resources, because of course, like even for me, I recognize like open source references really depend on the quality of the maintainers, and it's just me, and I'm just one person. So I'm also trying to figure this out. I'm relying and recommending these, let's say, main resources that I believe the industry has basically have collectively determined as golden standards. And so I will also be referencing their work and services. I know there are others. I know there are competitors, and I'm sure they have their own pros and cons. But time and time again, I find myself coming back to these resources, and I've seen them. I've seen the competitors as well. I'd say the main value add, like I just said, is the maintainers and the people behind them. So I'll pause there. I think that's a good ending spot for completing what I wanted to achieve from this video. I wanted to show the system design, high-level design of this project, just at least mentioning what I've been working on and the roadmap for the content and context that I have on my open source portfolio, and then closing out some of the life cycle of some of these projects that I need to close out myself before I come back to making something similar of this video. So thanks everyone.